This is A to Z with Mark Zinno, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it starts now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into A to Z here on Locked On Atlanta. John Michaels in for Mark Zinno. Zinno's off on vacation today, so I figured I'd do a little fill-in work for him and keep you locked on everything that's going on in the ATL. Coming up right about now, we got a lot we're going to dive into over the course of the podcast. Georgia, schedule, the Florida game, what's going on with that? We'll dive into a bunch of that. The NBA Finals goes down last night. The former Atlanta Hawk has the game of his life. Hawks fans were out last night saying, where was that when Al Horford was here? We'll dive into that. The Braves picking up a nice win yesterday over Colorado. They look for something that they haven't had the entire season. We'll get into that as well. And the Falcons, a very interesting conversation that came up on PFF this week about Deion Jones, where he could end up. They signed another receiver, and we'll dive into some of the people that have to step up for this 2022 campaign to be a whole lot better coming up this year. But let's start with what's going on. SEC coaches meetings went down this week, and I know Z is not as big of a college football guy as I am, but some interesting stuff coming out. Obviously, the Jimbo Fisher and the Nick Saban side of the equation aside, the new thing that's coming up with the SEC is 2025 is going to be here before we know it, and Texas and Oklahoma are going to be part of the mix when it comes to the conference. And now you try to figure out what that scheduling model is really going to look like. There's been talk of a one permanent crossover game and then having 8 potential non-permanent games, or they could have 3 permanent games and 6 rotating schedule, or it could stay at the 8-game model where it's going to be 1 and 7, and you try to figure out how you're going to come up with who the guys are going to be. But for the University of Georgia, it was interesting as a lot of people are trying to figure out if we go to the 3-man schedule, what's going to happen with Georgia's permanent crossover games. And I thought about this. To me, there's 3 teams that you absolutely must have. It's Tennessee, it's the University of Florida, and obviously Auburn, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. I saw some models where Tennessee was not part of that equation, and South Carolina would then be the group that ends up being in there as the permanent crossover game for Georgia. And it got me to thinking about a couple of things when it comes to the University of Georgia, the schedule, the way that they go about their business. One particular individual do not like it. I hate the Jacksonville game. And let me preface this by saying I have yet to ever be to the cocktail party. I've never had a chance during college football season to go down there. So I know there are a lot of people that look at this and go, if you haven't been there, you don't understand the pomp and circumstance of the Jacksonville game. And I get it. And the Jacksonville game creates about $30 million in revenue for the city of Jacksonville. And it kind of helps out when it's the University of Florida and Georgia. A lot of people set up their fall vacation around this. They'll go down on a Thursday. They go down and golf on Friday, hang out all day Saturday, go to the football game. A lot of times stay Sunday, go to the beach, maybe even get down there on a Wednesday with people that are having RVs and vacation homes and everything else. So I understand the economic impact for the city of Jacksonville. Kirby Smart was asked this week about it, and he said, basically he feels like he loses a recruiting weekend when it comes to not having a home-and-home series with the University of Florida. Scott Strickland, the athletic director of the University of Florida, said point blank he wants to keep the game in Jacksonville. He thinks keeping the game in Jacksonville is perfect the way that it is, and you end up having, basically a neutral site game, and these schools understand. But if from a revenue standpoint, whether it's either Georgia or Florida, understand you're losing a home game against your biggest rival. And think about how big that is if you lose a home game against your biggest rival at Georgia, not being able to get 93,000 people involved and going to that game every other year. You also have kids that never get a chance to experience the swamp, and vice versa for Florida kids. They never have a chance to experience what it's like for the University of Georgia to play up there in Athens. The model that I would like personally would be the 1-1-1. Home game in Athens, home game in Gainesville, neutral site game in Jacksonville. Now, I know the city of Jacksonville wants no parts of this because, again, they're going to lose $30 million in revenue on an annual basis with that game going down there. I know there are fans that like the pomp and circumstance of having the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville, and you don't want to lose that. But if I'm a season ticket holder, and I'm a season ticket holder in the University of Georgia this year, your 2 biggest games are neutral site games. You play Oregon at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You play Florida in Jacksonville. If I have to pony up 10, 20, 30, $40,000, whatever it may be, to be a season ticket holder at the University of Georgia, and I don't get to see the two best games at home, what do I want to have home games for? And I don't have their schedule sitting right in front of me. But the two biggest home games are October against Auburn and November against Tennessee. And then obviously with Georgia Tech being down the way that they are, the end of the year game doesn't seem to have as much cachet as it once did. So if I'm Georgia, I want to add a home game. I also think if you go to the model that the SEC is looking at and you go 3 permanent crossover games and then you're going to have 6 rotating games, you have to make that Florida game a home and home, because if one of your permanent games is now potentially a Jacksonville game like it has been, you're going to lose another home game. And if they go away from divisions, understand that the SEC East no longer is going to exist, and you're going to want to be 1 and 2. Let's be real. Alabama and Georgia are probably going to be on a collision course for 1 and 2 for a long time. But when you add a Texas, you add an Oklahoma, we all assume LSU with Brian Kelly is going to be better. We think that what's going on with Josh Heupel in Tennessee, they're going to be better. Billy Napier at Florida will probably have them better. Mark Stoops at Kentucky's playing well. Shane Beamer's got South Carolina pointed in the right trajectory. You're going to want as many home games as you can possibly get. I think the SEC needs to lead the way and do the 9-game conference schedule. I know Big 12 already has that. I believe the Pac-12 already has that. The Big 10 already has that. I don't like seeing right now the SEC playing slappies. I mean, let's be real. What does Georgia get playing last year, UAB or Middle Tennessee State? I think this year they have Charleston Southern on the schedule. That's great when it comes to paying these smaller schools. But I think what we want to see is great football. Great football is SEC teams playing other SEC teams. It's Georgia playing Oregon. I get the kickoff classic aspect. I love the folks at Chick-fil-A. They do a great job putting those games on at the beginning of the year. Georgia doesn't need that showcase anymore. You're a national title program. Do a couple of things. Take my advice. Do the 1-1-1. Home in Georgia, home at Florida, game in Jacksonville. And SEC, take my advice as well. Let's do the three permanent crossover, and then do the 6 rotating, get a 9-game conference schedule, and get the games that season ticket holders want, and get the games that fans really want. When we get back, the Hawks had a player that used to be a Hawk member have a huge night last night, and what's to come for the Braves as they look for their first 3-game winning streak. John Michaels in for Mark Zinno on A to Z here on Locked On Atlanta.